right, welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today, we welcome back on the show Shane Tenny. He is a certified financial planner. His latest Kevin MD article is titled Transition Planning, Financial Moves for Medical Residents and Fellows. Shane, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be here again today.
We'll get into the article in a little bit, but for those who didn't get a chance to listen to our first episode together, just briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate the chance to be here. So I am a certified financial planner professional. I'm also the managing partner at SPA, Dameron, Tenny. We're a financial planning firm working with physicians all over the country, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I am, for that matter, I'm also the host of the Prosperous Doc podcast. So I'll give myself a shout out here on your show, where we talk with folks doing pretty good work in the medical and dental community.
Wonderful. And tell us how you initially started working with clinicians and health professionals.
You know, that is a good question. About 25 years ago, my partners and I were just doing some analysis of our clientele. Our firm was started back about 50 years ago by a much older gentleman, Herb Spa. And so over the decades, we'd accumulated clients of all kinds of backgrounds. And as we were working with some business coaches and looking at our own clientele and the relationships we had with a number of hospital systems, we realized that a really high percentage of our clients were physicians. And so we realized that that was a market or a niche where we had some expertise and experience and specialization, and certainly one that needs a lot of capable, thoughtful, diligent planning. And so that's when we really began to double down on the branding in that area and focus. And so today, I think it's somewhere about 80% of our clients each year come from the medical or dental background, as well as another area we serve.
And just from your experience, the financial literacy of physicians and dentists and other healthcare professionals, how does that contrast with other professions?
A good question. I can't say how well it contrasts because I don't work with many folks from other professions, but I think it reflects the general population as a whole. I mean, all of us, or I should say, there are some folks who grow up in homes where finances are talked about freely and openly. There's some folks that have an affinity or a proclivity for financial vocabulary and have an interest in it. And then there's folks who don't. And so even within the medical or dental fields, we find some folks that have, pretty strong acumen and a lot don't. And I think that's an area where there's a unique opportunity for those in medicine, because you spend, a decade or more getting really specialized training that is all consuming. And so even if you have an interest, you may not have time to deal with some of the financial decisions. And because you're in the field of medicine, you are among the top 1% of income earners, which means the opportunity and the magnitude of your decisions financially has a big ripple effect. You're just dealing with more dollars. And so the impact of good decisions or bad decisions can be profound. And so that's where we really want to come alongside and help our clients make smart decisions with their money so they feel secure, free, and successful instead of stressed, anxious, and depressed.
All right. So let's talk about your Kevin MD article titled Transition Planning, Financial Moves for Medical Residents and Fellows. We're talking towards the end of July. And of course, during the summer, you have medical students going to internships and residents becoming fellows, big professional changes in their lives. And of course, there's also ramifications from a financial standpoint as well. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read that article, just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it.
For sure. So one of the things that we know in working with folks in the medical field is that not all doctors have a huge bank account and lots of income. And in fact, I would venture to say that all doctors start out quite the opposite. And so what we're trying to highlight here in this article is just the different stages that medical providers, physicians in particular, go through from training all the way through retirement or end of career and that sort of thing. And so the beginning, of course, is training in medical school in residency, which is a really intense period and a period with either no or little compensation. None if you're in medical school, relatively little compensation while in residency or fellowship. And what we've seen and what we know is that there is then a very short and focused period of time that we call transition phase or the transition plan, in between your training, whether it ends with residency or ends with fellowship, and starting in practice. And so, for example, as you point out, we're talking in the summer here, and so a lot of folks have finished their training in June. They've got a contract, they've got a job lined up, they're planning to start presumably in August, but the first paycheck may not come until the end of August or the beginning of September, something like that. And so there's a 2, 3, sometimes 4-month gap where the surprises can happen. And so we want to call that out and draw folks' attention to some of the planning that can be so helpful for you to have on the radar before you finish your training, your fellowship or residency.
All right. So go ahead and talk about some of those common surprises that these physicians may encounter.
Yeah, great question. There's, I'd say, 5 key things that we try to help folks have on the radar. I'll rattle them off here. One is health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you end your training in June, then generally your health insurance from your prior hospital or group or institution will end on the last day of June. Your new employer, assuming you start, say, August or September 1st, health insurance generally doesn't start until the first of the month following the month you start. And so you can have a gap of health insurance for, say, July, August, maybe even September. And so it's important that you are aware of that. Certainly, if you have any medical issues that you're aware, for occasionally we meet with clients who are pregnant during that period. So that's important to be aware. So health insurance is one. Number 2, you want to be aware of benefits that you currently have or had while in your training program that you may need to deal with or be able to maintain. 2 of the most common are the retirement plan that you had, the 401k from, say, residency, fellowship. What do we need to do with that? And then one of the other most common is disability insurance. A lot of training programs offer a really preferred or rich disability income protection plan to folks in training. And often that's portable and can be maintained if you act before you leave. So we want to put that on the radar. If you don't maintain it, then you end up having to go out in the private marketplace to look for supplemental coverage later. The third thing is not only past benefits, but future benefits. As you're signing up with the new employer, new group, new hospital system in July or August, what are the benefits that you need to avail yourself of there based on your family situation or needs? What things are a waste of money for you? So we want to help with that. And that would include decisions around even just tax withholding, those pesky W-4 forms. What should I put? Married in 4, married in 2, single in 0, all of those questions. The fourth thing is what to do with your student loan. I'll call this out for just a minute here. Student loans are always a source of enormous confusion, and now even more than ever, because as many folks know, individuals, physicians with federal student loans have been under basically the COVID forbearance for over 2 years now. Loan payments have not been required. The interest rate is set at 0%. And yet, despite that, individuals are getting credit towards their income-driven repayment plan or public service loan forgiveness. Right now, the opportunity is for individuals with federal student loans who have been under a grace period while they're coming out of training to switch into forbearance. You want to move out of grace period into forbearance so that you can start getting credit for not making payments, basically. Currently, the forbearance period is scheduled to end at the end of August. We think, and a lot of folks seem to be aligning with the expectation that forbearance will be extended again. And so it leaves a big question there. And then the fifth area that needs to be addressed during the transition period is really just cash flow expectations and expenses. What do I mean by that? Well, that's kind of the obvious one, but you've got a couple months coming with no income.
Yeah.
And so you're just planning to live off credit cards. It's an important thing to realize because sometimes there's travel that takes place over the summer. Oftentimes there are weddings, sometimes your own, but definitely friends. And so traveling to weddings, buying the clothes for weddings is important. There are credentialing fees. There are down payments on an apartment if you're moving to a new geographical location. And so we see that cash flow requirement being somewhere between $5,000 and $40,000 is not uncommon, again, depending on a lot of factors. And so if somebody's listening to this and, maybe still has a year or 2 of their residency, this is great to have on the radar because, of course, accumulating $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 while you're in residency isn't easy. And so having a long runway is helpful in that regard.
So walk us through a typical scenario that really illustrates some of these points that you talk about. And it could be from medical student to internship, it could be from resident to fellowship. But tell us a story, walk us through a scenario where some of these things that you talk about are really illustrated.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, for example, I'll try to give kind of a really typical scenario. Somebody finishes their residency program at the end of June, maybe in one city, and they've got a contract, that they signed several months prior to move to a new town and start a career. And they think to themselves, well, I've been in training between medical school and residency for maybe 8 or 9 years, and I'm ready to take a breath, have a little free time, go visit some friends, and so I'm going to start my new job in September. And so you talk with the HR, you talk with the hiring physician or the group, and they say, perfect, September is Labor Day, why don't you start on September 5th? Okay. And so it's a period that you're just so looking forward to for a little downtime in mental space. And during this time, you want to go back home and see family. You need to load up your car. Maybe you need to plan to do your credentialing or board exams in Chicago, something like this. And you have a friend getting married. And so we've got here now the month of July, the month of August, and the month of September. We've got, 2.5 months. Even though you're starting September 5th, it doesn't dawn on you until August that your first paycheck won't come until September 25th. So you've got a period where you have no income coming in. You may have some residual credit card debt from your residency program, for example. And so we need money. And so it's just helpful to think through, okay, how much is it going to cost to drive home or to load up my stuff? How much is it going to cost to fly down to Key West for my buddy's wedding? How much will I have to pay for my suit if I'm in the wedding? I'll expand on health insurance for a minute. There's a gap in health insurance. Most folks are healthy, and so that's not a big concern. I will say that COBRA, which is the health insurance kind of stopgap, can be elected retroactively. So you don't always have to make that decision, right as you're leaving and walking out the door. But if you end up in an emergency department, during this transition period, you can retroactively elect COBRA. It certainly is not without its challenges, but that can be done.
Sure.
And so before you leave, to just pick up on all 5 of the topics I mentioned, before you leave in June, you want to work with the HR department at the hospital and find out if there's a disability insurance plan that's discounted that you can maintain. And if so, complete that paperwork. You'll want to identify with your new employer, when do you need to fill out benefits paperwork to start? Do you want the life insurance coverage? Do you want the dental coverage, disability insurance, health insurance? As I was kind of setting up this scenario, health insurance generally starts the first day of the month following your employment. And so if you're starting the Tuesday after Labor Day, well, you've already missed the 1st of September. That means you don't have health insurance for September until generally October. And so that's kind of the case study scenario of what comes in and why it can be so helpful for folks who are working long, intense weeks as they're finishing their residency program, to be able to have an article like the one we've written, or to be able to talk to a financial planner to help guide them through some of these really important things that can just help set them up for a great start. Because what we want, and what everybody wants, is you want to get that first paycheck and you want to feel like, great, this is the first day of the next chapter of my professional career. And not feel like you're coming in with a bunch of obstacles or headwinds or roadblocks or mistakes from a fumbled transition.
So speaking of mistakes in a fumble transition, what would you say is the number one red flag or mistakes that you see from these physicians in transition?
The number one mistake would be missing the opportunity to carry forward benefits from your residency program.
Right.
You get so focused on crossing the finish line, you miss the opportunity to carry forward benefits. I can't stop with number one because there's a couple. The number two mistake historically would be not making the right student loan elections to maximize the credit for, especially for those who hope to be pursuing public service loan forgiveness. And then the number 3 mistake, I would say, would be just missing the opportunity to plan and have a cushion of money to get them through. And so again, you navigate, credit cards work, but you end up in October, November, and December paying off your summer transition instead of building the next chapter.
We're talking to Shane Tenny. He's a certified financial planner. His latest Kevin MD article is titled Transition Planning, Financial Moves for Medical Residents and Fellows. Shane, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
Well, I'm a financial planner, Kevin, so I can never miss the opportunity to help encourage people. The message number one is plan. Even if money isn't your strength, even if it is an area of energy for you, if you can look ahead and anticipate what's coming and try to make some thoughtful decisions, I believe the saying is, an ounce of planning is worth a pound of cure. And so that is the key. Look forward and try to learn what will help you move forward. And if you don't know, then ask for help, whether from a friend, colleague, or a professional.
Shane, thanks again for coming back on the show, sharing your time and insight.
Absolutely, Kevin. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all you do for the community.